The Sunday lunch was loud and warm, full of clinking glasses and laughter that bounced off the walls of their Bulawayo home. Naledi, 19, sat quietly at the long wooden table, trying to soak it all in without drawing too much attention to herself. Her parents were busy raising their glasses to her older sister, Cool, celebrating yet another promotion, while everyone around her cheered. Naledi smiled softly, feeling a mix of pride and that familiar tug of being in the background. Then Cool, leaning back with that smirk Naledi had learned to dread, said it. Mom and Dad told me something funny once. You were never planned. You were just an accident. The laughter around the table stuttered, broken by awkward shuffles and uneasy glances. Naledi froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Her chest tightened, a heavy, sinking weight pressing down. She looked at her mother, searching for a smile, a denial, anything. But her mother only looked away, eyes fixed on something far beyond the table. Naledi's lips pressed into a thin line. She tried to laugh it off, forcing a weak smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set her napkin down. Without a word, she rose, leaving her chair scraping against the floor, and walked out of the room. The laughter continued behind her, a cruel soundtrack that made her steps feel heavier. Outside, the sun was warm on her face, but it couldn't touch the cold crack that had opened inside her. In that moment, standing alone in the quiet of the yard, Naledi made a decision. She would no longer be the family's mistake. She would stop shrinking for their comfort and start carving a life that belonged entirely to her. That night, Naledi sat on her bed, staring at the small, worn suitcase in front of her. She hadn't packed much, a few clothes, her favorite notebook, and the little things she couldn't leave behind. But as she folded her things, her eyes kept drifting to the walls. Family photos hung in neat rows. Cool in every single one, always in the center, smiling wide, shining like she belonged to the world. Naledi's face, when it appeared at all, was tucked into the corner, half hidden, almost like an afterthought. A soft knock on her door startled her. Her father's face appeared in the dim light of the hallway. "Don't be dramatic," he said, trying to sound calm. "Your sister didn't mean it." Naledi didn't look up. She couldn't. The words were like a dam breaking in her chest, and memories rushed in all at once. The time she had raised her hand in class and the teacher only praised Cool. The time she had stayed silent while Cool got the attention she never received. The small cuts and constant reminders that she didn't really belong. She picked up a piece of paper and wrote a short note, her handwriting steady even though her hands shook slightly. "Don't worry. The accident won't bother you again." She didn't want to explain, didn't want to argue. She just needed to leave, to vanish from the life that had made her feel so small for so long. By the time the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, Naledi was already at the bus station. She clutched the handle of her suitcase, feeling the weight of everything she was leaving behind and the sharp ache of the unknown ahead. The city lights of Bulawayo faded behind her, replaced by the long, dark road stretching toward Johannesburg. She didn't have much, just a suitcase, a few coins, and a fierce, quiet pain driving her forward. For the first time in her life, she felt the strange mix of fear and freedom. She was leaving everything she knew, everything that had hurt her, but for the first time, it was on her own terms. Naledi didn't look back. She couldn't. There was only the road ahead, and with each mile, she felt a small spark of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Life in Johannesburg hit Naledi harder than she expected. The city was loud, crowded, and full of people who barely noticed her. For the first few months, she slept on a friend's couch, clinging to the small space she could call her own. Mornings meant long hours serving coffee at a busy cafe, and evenings were spent walking the streets, hunting for odd jobs or counting every coin she could save. Some nights, she cried quietly, thinking about how far she was from home, and how far she still had to go. But slowly, her pain began to change. The anger, the hurt, and the loneliness she had carried for years became fuel. Naledi signed up for online courses, staying up late into the night learning everything she could about business, cooking, and hospitality. She took night classes, worked extra shifts, and slowly, piece by piece, built skills she hadn't realized she had. At 26, after years of saving, experimenting, and learning, she launched her own catering business. She called it Xeni Foods, a small, private joke at first, a nod to being the accident no one thought would amount to anything. But what started as a one-woman kitchen in a tiny rented space grew quickly. She poured her heart into every dish, every event, every client. Word spread, and by her early 30s, Naledi was one of Johannesburg's most sought-after caterers. Magazines ran stories about her, social media buzzed with her work, but she never went back home. She had built a family of her own, loyal staff who believed in her, clients who trusted her completely, and a sense of peace that no one else could take away. The girl who had felt invisible at the family table now commanded rooms with her presence and skill. She carried her past like a quiet shadow, a reminder of where she had come from, but it no longer held her down. For the first time, Naledi understood that she didn't need anyone's approval to matter. Johannesburg had been brutal, lonely, and exhausting, but it had also rebuilt her, reshaped her, and shown her that her life was hers to claim. And she had claimed it completely. One evening, Naledi was setting up for a corporate event, arranging tables and checking floral arrangements, when a familiar name came over the client's conversation. Cool Ndlovu, someone said, and Naledi froze mid-step. Her heart skipped. She hadn't heard that name in years. She stayed quiet, pretending to adjust a centerpiece, but inside, something twisted. Her sister, the one who had always seemed perfect, untouchable, untamed by life's setbacks, was now someone she had only heard in passing, someone struggling. Later, during a quiet moment, she scrolled through social media while sipping her coffee. A post caught her eye. Cool Ndlovu seeking investors after business loss. Naledi blinked, and then she almost laughed out loud. The girl who had once shone under her parents' praise, the star in every photo, the one who had so casually called her an accident, was now asking for help. She could almost see the irony, taste it like a bitter chocolate. She sat back, staring at the screen long after the post scrolled away, her mind wandering through all the years between them. All the times she had been overlooked, ignored, and dismissed. The small cuts that had once hurt so much now felt like a shield she had forged. The perfect daughter, the one everyone had adored, was faltering. And here she was not just surviving, but thriving, her life built from her own determination, piece by piece. Naledi's lips curved into the smallest smile, quiet, almost imperceptible, but full of something she hadn't felt in years. Satisfaction, yes, but also relief. She whispered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Maybe some accidents turn out better than the plan. For a moment, she let herself linger there, letting the thought settle. Life had a strange way of balancing things. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't gloating. She was just aware. She had taken her pain, her past, and turned it into something solid, something real. Meanwhile, the person who had once seemed untouchable was facing her own reckoning. And Naledi, finally, could simply watch, knowing she had survived, thrived, and most importantly, found peace. Weeks later, Naledi was in her office, going over invoices and emails, when her assistant knocked and walked in holding a phone. "There's someone on the line asking for you," she said, holding it out. "She says her name is Cool." Naledi froze, her hand hovering over the desk. Her heart thumped, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt slightly. Cool. The name carried years of hurt, shame, and memories she had tried so hard to lock away. She took the phone, and the voice that came through was almost unrecognizable, trembling, hesitant. "Naledi, it's me. I need your help." The words hit her like a punch. Cool explained, haltingly, that their parents were sick, the old family home was falling apart, and debts had piled up until they didn't know how to survive. Every sentence seemed to drag the past back into the room, along with all the anger, the loneliness, and the sting of the word accident. For a long moment, Naledi said nothing. She just listened, breathing evenly, her mind sorting through years of pain, betrayal, and hard-won independence. Then, slowly, with a calmness that surprised even her, she said, "I'm surprised you remember the accident's number." There was a pause on the line. Then she hung up. That night, sleep didn't come. She stared at the ceiling, memories playing in her mind like old movies. The lunch table, the laughter, the words that had made her run away. The hurt still throbbed, raw and unhealed. But underneath it, something new was stirring, a quiet, steady shift in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt a strange pull, not of anger or revenge, but of curiosity. Maybe it was time. Maybe she needed to see them one last time, to understand fully, to close this chapter properly. Naledi turned over in bed, her mind restless. The city outside hummed faintly through the window, lights flickering in distant buildings. The past had shaped her, hardened her, built her into someone strong, independent, and unbroken. And now, for the first time, she wondered if facing it once more could finally bring her the peace she had worked so hard to earn. 15 years had passed, but the memory of running from this house was still sharp in Naledi's mind. She drove slowly down the dusty driveway, the familiar bumps under the tires making her chest tighten. The house looked smaller now, worn and tired, its paint peeling, the garden overgrown. It was the same home she had fled as a scared 19-year-old, but time had left its mark, making it look fragile, almost defeated. Her mother was at the door before she could even knock, limping slightly, eyes wide and wet. "Naledi," she whispered, her voice trembling. For a moment, it seemed like time had stopped, and the years between them hung thick in the air. Behind her mother, Cool appeared. She was thinner now, her confident posture replaced by weariness. There was no smirk, no easy laugh, only a shadow of the girl who had once humiliated Naledi at that same family table. No one spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with all the years of guilt, regret, and unspoken apologies that lingered like dust. Naledi stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning the walls. Family photos still hung, but her face was missing from every new one. It was a sharp, quiet reminder of the past, of how invisible she had felt, even in her own home. She looked at them, calm but steady, and said softly, "You deleted me, just like I deleted your number." Her voice was low, almost gentle, but the words cut deeper than any shouting could. Her mother flinched, Cool's lips parted slightly, and the air felt as though it had been split in two. Naledi didn't wait for a response. She let the silence stretch, letting her words sink into the cracks of the house, into the hearts of the people who had hurt her. 15 years of distance, of building a life without them, had brought her here, not for revenge, but to remind them and herself of the power of her absence. Standing there, she realized something. She had returned not as the scared, overlooked girl, but as someone who had grown, who had survived, and who could face her past without being crushed by it. The house, the family, the old wounds, they all looked different now. And for the first time, Naledi felt that quiet, firm edge of control, knowing she was no longer their accident. That night, the three of them sat around the small kitchen table, the teacups steaming between their hands. The air was heavy, thick with years of unspoken words and memories that had been locked away for too long. Naledi's father cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly as he wrapped them around his cup. "We were scared when we had you," he said finally, voice low and rough. "Money was tight. Your sister was already older. We didn't plan for you, but we never meant you weren't wanted." Naledi stared at him, the words sinking in but not filling the spaces left by years of neglect. "And you never meant it," she said slowly, her voice calm. "But you let her say it. You all did." Her gaze swept across the room, landing on her sister, on her mother, as if she were naming every silent accomplice. Cool's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "I was jealous," she admitted, voice breaking. "You were always kind. People liked you more. I wanted to hurt you, and I did." For the first time, Naledi's eyes softened. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said quietly. "You did." There was no anger in her tone, no sharp edges. Just a tired acknowledgement, the kind that comes after years of surviving, of building yourself up, and finally seeing the truth laid bare. Her father looked down at his tea, shame written across his face. Her mother wiped at her eyes, silent, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of the past. And Cool, crying openly now, let the hurt she had caused be seen, really seen, for the first time. Naledi leaned back in her chair, letting the quiet settle. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a release. She had heard the truth, faced it, and survived it. The years of pain hadn't vanished, but they no longer held her hostage. For the first time that night, there was a strange sense of relief in the room, a brittle but real acknowledgement of the past. Naledi's voice remained soft, steady, and tired, but there was power in her calm. She had faced the worst, and now the truth was out in the open. And for once, she didn't feel small. Before leaving, Naledi reached into her bag and pulled out a plain envelope. She set it on the table in front of her parents and slid it gently across the worn. Inside was the deed to a small house in town, fully paid. "For Mom and Dad," she said softly. "You won't lose everything." Her mother's hand trembled as it hovered over the envelope, and Cool's mouth fell open in shock. "Why would you do that, after everything we did?" Cool asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and guilt. Naledi met her sister's eyes calmly. "Because I don't want to carry your hatred anymore," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm done carrying all the pain, the anger, the disappointment. That's mine to leave behind, not yours to keep." Her parents' tears flowed freely, wet tracks shining on their faces. Cool sank into her chair, covering her face with her hand. But Naledi didn't stay for their apologies, their pleas, or their explanations. She had given them a gift, not out of duty, not out of guilt, but because she had built her own life, her own peace, and it no longer depended on their recognition. "Take care of each other," she said as she stood, gathering her bag. "I've already taken care of myself." Her words hung in the air, simple but powerful, carrying all the strength of the years she had spent fighting to become who she was. Naledi walked to the door, pausing for just a moment to glance back at the house she had once fled. The walls still held memories, both bitter and sweet, but she felt no pull to stay. She had finally found a place where she belonged, not in the past, not in the family that had tried to define her, but in the life she had built entirely on her own terms. As she stepped outside into the late afternoon light, a quiet smile touched her lips. She didn't need their forgiveness or their love to feel whole. She had given what she could, drawn the line, and chosen herself. For the first time in a long time, she felt free, knowing that the past could no longer weigh her down. A few months later, Cool was sitting alone in her small apartment, scrolling through her social media feed when a video caught her eye. The headline read, Akseni Foods expands internationally. Her hands froze on her phone, and she leaned closer, eyes widening. The screen showed Naledi, smiling brightly, standing in a bustling kitchen surrounded by her staff. She spoke directly to the camera, her voice warm and steady. To everyone who ever felt like an accident, maybe you were just meant for a different path. Cool's chest tightened, and tears streamed down her face. She hadn't expected to feel this way. Pride, envy, shame, all tangled up in a knot she couldn't loosen. Naledi had built something incredible, something Cool had once thought impossible. She didn't need revenge, didn't need to confront her family or humiliate. She had simply lived her life on her own terms and created a world where she thrived. Cool watched, feeling the weight of every selfish word, every careless action from the past. She thought about the lunches, the laughter, the cruel comment that had driven Naledi away. And now, seeing her sister succeed beyond anything she could imagine, Cool understood in a way that was painful and humbling. Naledi had never needed her approval or their recognition. She had carved her own path and walked it fully, boldly, and beautifully. For the first time, Cool felt true shame, the kind that cuts deeper than anger or resentment. She realized she had wasted so many years trying to live up to an image, trying to claim a life that was never hers, while her sister quietly became everything she was meant to be. She watched the video again, hearing Naledi's words echoing in her mind. They weren't just for the audience. They were for anyone who had felt small, unwanted, or overlooked. And they were for her too, whether she wanted to admit it or not. Cool wiped her tears, feeling the sting of truth settle deep inside her. Naledi didn't need to punish her. She didn't need to come back for revenge. She had already done the one thing that mattered. She had found peace, success, and freedom. Things Cool had never managed to claim for herself. For the first time, Cool wasn't just ashamed of what she had done. She was humbled by what her sister had become. And in that quiet, painful realization, she understood that Naledi's greatest triumph wasn't just in her business or fame. It was in her life, fully lived, completely unshackled, and beautifully her own. Naledi stood on the balcony of her new apartment in Nairobi, the city lights stretching out before her like a sea of tiny stars. The air was warm, carrying the faint hum of traffic and distant laughter from the streets below. For a moment, she just breathed, letting the quiet settle around her, a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind years ago. Her assistant appeared at the door, holding a thick photo album. "These just came in the mail," she said softly. "From your mom." Naledi took it gently and flipped it open. The pages were full of old family pictures, snapshots of birthdays, holidays, and ordinary days she had long tried to forget. Her fingers paused on one of herself as a child, smiling shyly at the camera, a tiny spark of hope still visible in her eyes despite the shadows around her. She traced the image with her fingertip, a small, wistful smile forming on her lips. "You weren't an accident," she whispered, almost to herself. "You were the correction." It wasn't a shout, and it wasn't anger. It was the quiet recognition of a life she had rebuilt, brick by brick, without letting the past define her. She had survived the humiliation, the rejection, and the pain, and she had emerged stronger, free, and complete. Closing the album, Naledi turned away from the balcony and walked inside. The apartment felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could finally let go of old wounds and just be herself. There was no revenge, no lingering bitterness, just the calm, steady peace of someone who had claimed her life fully and entirely. And as she set the album down on the table, her voice barely a whisper, she thought, "Sometimes the best revenge is disappearing long enough to become unforgettable."